Right now, you probably have a wallet, a bank account, or at least a number on a screen that tells you how much you're worth. Every meal you eat, every shirt you wear, every journey you take depends on money changing hands. It feels so natural that it's almost impossible to imagine life without it. But the real story is far stranger. For almost all of human history, money didn't exist. No coins, no paper bills, no bank accounts. Yet people still survived, raised families, built villages, traded goods, settled disputes, and even created massive civilizations. How? The answer completely changes the way you think about wealth. If you walked into a modern supermarket without money, you'd leave empty-handed. If you walked into a prehistoric community without money, you might walk away with food, shelter, and help from complete strangers. Not because people were more generous, but because human survival depended on something far more valuable than currency. It depended on trust. For over 95% of human history, people lived in small groups of hunter-gatherers. Anthropologists estimate these bands usually consisted of around 30 to 150 people, a number that later became associated with what psychologist Robin Dunbar called Dunbar's number. His research suggested that humans naturally struggled to maintain stable social relationships beyond roughly 150 people. Why does that matter? Because everyone knew everyone else. When you live among the same people every day, cheating someone isn't just dishonest, it's dangerous. Your reputation becomes your survival strategy. If you refuse to help others today, they may refuse to help you tomorrow. If you steal food, nobody wants to hunt with you next week. Social trust becomes more valuable than any object you could possess. Imagine returning from a hunt with more meat than your family could eat before it spoiled. You wouldn't sell it. You would share it. At first, that sounds unbelievably generous, but it wasn't charity. It was an investment in future survival. One day your hunt would fail. Another family would succeed. The favor would return, sometimes weeks or months later. Instead of storing wealth in a bank, ancient humans stored it inside relationships. This system is known by anthropologists as reciprocal altruism, an idea developed extensively by evolutionary biologist Robert Trivers. His work showed that helping another individual can actually increase your own chances of survival, provided the favor is likely to be returned in the future. In other words, generosity could be selfish in the smartest possible way. Your social network became your savings account. Your reputation became your insurance policy, and your willingness to cooperate became your greatest investment. This wasn't unique to one region of the world. Archaeological evidence from Africa, Europe, Asia, and Australia suggests that cooperation existed wherever humans settled. Different cultures developed different traditions, but the underlying principle remained remarkably similar. Relationships created security. Objects came second. This idea can feel strange today because modern economies teach you to separate transactions from emotions. You pay, you receive, the interaction ends. Ancient life wasn't like that. Every exchange strengthened or weakened a relationship. Every shared meal communicated something. Every act of generosity carried a memory. Every refusal had consequences. Researchers studying present-day hunter-gatherer societies, including the Hadza people of Tanzania, have observed similar patterns. Food sharing remains common, especially after successful hunts. Individual success often benefits the entire community because tomorrow's success could belong to someone else. This wasn't perfect equality. Some people were better hunters. Some gathered more food. Some possessed exceptional knowledge. But prestige came less from accumulating possessions than from becoming someone others respected enough to follow. Status wasn't measured by what you owned. It was measured by how valuable you were to everyone else. That raises an interesting question. If people weren't using money, how did they actually trade? The answer is more complicated than most history books suggest, and it begins with one of the biggest misconceptions about the origins of money. For generations, one simple explanation dominated economics. People bartered. One person had fish. Another had grain. They swapped. Eventually, barter became too inconvenient, so money was invented. It sounds logical. There's just one problem. The historical evidence doesn't really support it. Anthropologist David Graeber, drawing on decades of ethnographic research, argued that no society has ever been found where barter was the primary system used within close communities. Instead, people who knew each other relied mostly on credit, obligation, and long-term trust. Think about that. If your neighbor needed firewood, you didn't demand 3 baskets of berries before helping. You simply gave the wood because everyone understood that balances were kept in memory rather than on paper. You owed people. People owed you. Nobody carried a calculator. Instead, communities carried shared memories. That doesn't mean barter never existed. It certainly did. But it usually happened between strangers, traveling groups, or communities that lacked strong social ties. When trust disappeared, direct exchange became necessary. Imagine meeting another tribe hundreds of kilometers away. They didn't know your character. They couldn't trust promises. So instead of saying, "I'll repay you next month," you traded immediately. A spear for animal hides, stone tools for shells, salt for dried meat. The exchange ended the moment both sides walked away. Within your own community, however, life worked differently. Everyone remembered who contributed. Everyone noticed who only took. This invisible accounting system required no coins because the community itself acted as the ledger. It wasn't written down. It lived inside people's memories. As human populations grew, this system became harder to maintain. Villages expanded into towns. Towns became cities. Strangers became neighbors. Neighbors became anonymous faces. Once you could no longer personally know everyone around you, trust alone was no longer enough. Something else had to replace it. Before that happened, however, humans invented another fascinating form of wealth: gifts. Not birthday presents, not holiday celebrations, powerful social gifts. In many ancient cultures, giving expensive or valuable items wasn't simply an act of kindness. It demonstrated influence. It created obligations. It strengthened alliances. The larger the gift, the greater the expectation that one day the favor would be returned. Anthropologist Marcel Mauss described this in his famous work, The Gift. He argued that gifts were rarely free. They created invisible social contracts that connected entire communities together. A gift wasn't just an object. It was a relationship. Declining a gift could even be seen as an insult because it rejected the relationship being offered. Imagine receiving a beautifully crafted spear from another family. You couldn't simply say, "Thanks." Now you carried an obligation. One day you would return something equally meaningful. This cycle strengthened trust across generations. In some societies, entire festivals revolved around giving away wealth instead of accumulating it. Prestige came from demonstrating abundance through generosity rather than displaying possessions for yourself. That sounds almost backwards today. Modern success often means owning more than everyone else. Ancient success often meant proving you could afford to give more away. The psychology behind this still exists. Think about charitable donations with buildings named after wealthy benefactors. Think about lavish wedding gifts. Think about expensive business dinners. Even today, gifts often communicate status, trust, and long-term relationships more than immediate economic value. Your brain still understands a language that evolved thousands of years before money existed. Then agriculture changed everything. When humans began farming around 12,000 years ago, food could finally be stored. For the first time, people could produce more than they immediately needed. That single change transformed human history. Because once wealth could be stored, it could also be counted. And once it could be counted, entirely new ideas about ownership, inequality, and eventually money began to emerge. The moment humans learned to farm, the rules of survival changed forever. For hundreds of thousands of years, wealth disappeared almost as quickly as it was found. Meat spoiled, fruit rotted. Most possessions were too heavy to carry if a group moved. There was little reason to accumulate more than you could use. Agriculture changed that overnight. Fields produced harvests that could be stored for months. Granaries filled with grain. Herds of animals multiplied. Land suddenly became something worth protecting because it could feed generations instead of days. One invention quietly transformed human society: the surplus. For the first time, a family could produce more food than it needed. That extra food could support craftsmen who no longer had to farm. It could feed soldiers, priests, builders, and rulers. Entire cities became possible because farmers produced enough to feed people who never touched a field. This was the beginning of specialization. Instead of everyone doing everything, people became experts. Some shaped pottery, some forged tools, some built homes, some observed the stars, others recorded information. Human civilization became dramatically more productive because people focused on a single skill instead of trying to master them all. But every advantage came with a cost. How do you fairly exchange a basket of wheat for a bronze knife? How many chickens equal a clay pot? How much grain should a builder receive for constructing a house? The larger society became, the harder these questions were to answer. The old system of remembering favors simply couldn't keep up. You couldn't personally know thousands of people. You couldn't remember every obligation. Trust alone no longer scaled. Something else was needed. Long before coins existed, many civilizations developed systems of accounting. In ancient Mesopotamia, one of the world's earliest civilizations, temple officials carefully recorded who delivered grain, who received supplies, and who owed what to whom. Clay tablets became humanity's first financial records. The surprising part? Many historians believe writing itself may have developed partly because people needed a reliable way to keep track of economic transactions. Before stories were written, before literature, before history books, humans were already recording debts. It turns out that memory has limits. Writing doesn't. As trade expanded across greater distances, another challenge appeared. Different communities valued different things. A farmer might value cattle. A fisherman preferred salt. A craftsman wanted metal. Merchants traveling between cities needed something that almost everyone would accept. Different societies experimented with different answers. Cowrie shells became valuable across parts of Africa and Asia. Large stone discs served as money on the island of Yap. Cocoa beans were used by the Aztecs. Salt was so valuable in some ancient societies that Roman soldiers were sometimes associated with payments linked to it, giving rise to the word salary. Notice something unusual. Money wasn't originally valuable because governments said so. It became valuable because people collectively trusted that someone else would also accept it tomorrow. Money has always depended on belief. A gold coin has no idea it's valuable. A paper note is just decorated paper. Even the numbers inside your bank account exist only as digital records. Their value comes from shared trust. The same invisible force that held hunter-gatherer communities together never truly disappeared. It simply changed form. Instead of trusting your neighbors personally, you now trust institutions. You trust banks. You trust governments. You trust that the number on your phone represents something real. And almost every day that trust works. But history also shows what happens when it breaks. Civilizations have watched currencies collapse. Inflation has erased fortunes. Empires have fallen because people stopped believing in the value of the money they carried. The object itself wasn't the foundation. Trust was, just on a much larger scale. This reveals something fascinating about human psychology. From ancient villages to modern financial markets, the world's economy has always rested on the same invisible foundation. People believing that tomorrow will work the same way as today. That belief has built kingdoms. And when it disappears, kingdoms begin to crumble. But perhaps the biggest surprise isn't how humans invented money. It's that, for thousands of years, they proved they could build thriving societies without it. If ancient humans could build communities without money, why does it feel impossible for you to imagine life without it today? Because money didn't just change the economy. It changed the way your brain thinks. Imagine waking up tomorrow in a world where every price tag disappeared. No salaries. No online banking. No credit cards. Would you know how much your skills are worth? Or would you have to prove your value in other ways? For ancient humans, value wasn't printed on a coin. It was demonstrated every day. Could you hunt? Could you build shelter? Could you heal injuries? Could you settle disputes? Could you teach children? Every person contributed something that helped the group survive. Your usefulness defined your place in society. That principle hasn't disappeared. It has simply become harder to notice. Today, your job title, qualifications, and income often seem like the measure of your worth. But underneath all of that, employers still reward people who solve problems. Businesses still succeed by creating value. Communities still depend on cooperation. The tools have changed. Human nature hasn't. This idea appears again and again throughout history. When archaeologists uncover ancient settlements, they rarely find evidence of people living entirely alone. Instead, they discover neighborhoods, shared ovens, communal storage areas, workshops, and gathering places. Humans didn't become the planet's dominant species because they were the strongest. They became dominant because they cooperated better than almost every other animal. Evolutionary biologist Joseph Henrich has argued that humans thrive through collective intelligence. No single person knows how to build an entire civilization. One person knows farming, another knows engineering, another medicine, another navigation. Civilization exists because knowledge is shared. Think about your own life. You probably couldn't manufacture your own smartphone. You couldn't mine the metals, design the processor, write the operating system, launch communication satellites, or construct the power grid that charges it, yet use all of those things every day. Why? because millions of strangers cooperate through systems built on trust. In a strange way, your daily life still depends on the same principle that helped hunter-gatherers survive. You rely on people you'll never meet. The scale is different. The psychology is the same. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson ancient humans left behind. Money is an incredibly useful invention. It allows billions of strangers to cooperate without personally knowing one another. It makes global trade possible. It fuels innovation, investment, and technological progress. But money was never the foundation. Trust was. Money simply became its messenger. Whenever trust disappears, even the strongest economies begin to shake. Whenever trust grows, opportunities multiply. That's why successful businesses obsess over reputation. Why brands spend decades earning customer confidence. Why investors study credibility as much as profits. Why friendships and relationships still matter more than possessions. Trust remains humanity's most valuable currency. Long before gold filled treasure chests, long before banks stored fortunes, long before stock markets flashed numbers across giant screens, there were people sitting around fires, sharing food they could have kept for themselves, believing that kindness would one day return. Most of the time, it did. Those simple acts of cooperation helped small bands become villages. Villages became cities. Cities became civilizations. And civilizations built the modern world. So the next time you tap your bank card, send money with your phone, or check the balance in your account, remember this. You're not just using money. You're participating in a system built on thousands of years of human trust. Because before humanity believed in coins, before it believed in banks, before it believed in wealth, it first believed in each other. And maybe that's the real reason money works at all. The numbers in your account matter, but the trust behind them matters even more. Because just as at the beginning of this story, every meal you eat, every shirt you wear, and every journey you take still depends on something invisible, not money. People believing in one another.
Want to truly understand people?
Decode success with us.